Imagine standing on the bridge of a British corvette in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at 3 in the morning. It's May 1943, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. The darkness is absolute, the kind of pitch black that makes experienced sailors feel blind and helpless. 20 miles away, a German U-boat commander is on his conning tower, breathing in the salt air, confident that his submarine is invisible in this darkness. His crew is relaxed, smoking cigarettes, joking with each other while their diesel engines charge the massive batteries below. Their radar detector is completely silent. They have no idea, not even the slightest hint, that they're being watched. Inside your corvette, a young radar operator is staring at a glowing green screen, watching a bright that represents that U-boat. He can see the submarine's exact position, its speed, even which direction it's heading. The U-boat crew thinks they're invisible, but to you, they might as well be lit up with searchlights. In exactly 7 minutes, your ship will be in attack position. In 8 minutes, your depth charges will be falling. In 9 minutes, that U-boat and every man aboard will be at the bottom of the Atlantic, and they'll die never understanding what detected them, never knowing that an invisible technology had been hunting them all along. This isn't science fiction. This is a true story of May 1943, when 42 German U-boats were destroyed in a single month by a technology so secret, so revolutionary, that even today most people don't know the full story. This is about the moment when a device no bigger than your fist changed the entire course of World War II, killed 30,000 men, and transformed naval warfare forever. What you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the Battle of the Atlantic, because this isn't a story about brave sailors or bigger guns or better tactics. This is about how British scientists created an invisible weapon that the Germans never saw coming, and by the time they figured out, it was far too late. Stay with me, because you're about to discover the secret technology that won the war. North Atlantic, May 24th, 1943, exactly 0600 hours. Grand Admiral Doenitz sat completely alone in his headquarters office at the Hotel Am Steinplatz in Berlin, staring down at the message sheet on his desk with hands that trembled slightly despite decades of iron military discipline and self-control. The order he was about to transmit to every U-boat commander still alive and operating in the Atlantic Ocean would mark the definitive end of everything they had fought for, sacrificed for, died for since September 1939, when the war began. This was the admission, painful and humiliating, that his legendary wolf packs had been utterly defeated not by superior Allied seamanship, not by brilliant tactical innovations, not by overwhelming numbers of escort vessels, but by a technology his own technical experts and scientists had repeatedly and categorically assured him was physically impossible to build, that violated the known laws of physics as they understood them. A radar system operating at wavelengths his scientists swore couldn't work, that could detect submarines in absolute darkness, through fog and rain and storm, could see what human eyes could never hope to detect even in perfect visibility and broad daylight. The casualty number spread across his desk told a story written in the blood of young German submariners and the cold seawater of the Atlantic. 42 U-boats destroyed in a single month, more losses than any previous month in the entire war. 1,832 of his best trained, most experienced submariners dead. Gone forever to the bottom of the Atlantic in steel coffins they believed were invincible weapons. 25% of his entire operational submarine strength, completely annihilated in just 30 days of operations. All because British escort corvettes and RAF Coastal Command patrol aircraft carry mysterious devices mounted in odd-looking housings that could detect a submarine periscope at 900 yards distance in pitch darkness, could track a surface U-boat charging its batteries from 3 miles away while remaining completely invisible to German detection equipment, could guide depth charges and Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars onto targets with devastating accuracy while the attacking crews never even saw their victims with their own eyes. His boats had been sitting on the surface at night, completely confident in their invisibility, totally unaware they were being continuously watched, precisely tracked, and systematically hunted by an electromagnetic detection net they couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't detect with any equipment they possessed, and couldn't possibly escape. The withdrawal message went out at precisely 0615 hours, transmitted by radio to every U-boat command station and base from Norway down through France to the Bay of Biscay. All boats would draw immediately from North Atlantic convoy routes. Cease all offensive operations against Allied convoys. Return to base for reassignment. And in that exact moment, as Doenitz would later write with painful honesty in his post-war memoirs, we had definitively lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The submarine campaign that had brought Great Britain to the very edge of starvation and defeat in 1940 and 1941, that had sunk millions upon millions of tons of irreplaceable Allied merchant shipping, that had been Nazi Germany's only remaining strategic weapon genuinely capable of winning the war through economic strangulation, was completely finished. Ended not by greater numbers of Allied ships, not by braver sailors, not by superior tactics or training, but by pure physics and electromagnetic engineering that his naval intelligence services and scientific advisors had never anticipated, never imagined possible, never prepared any defense against. But what Doenitz didn't know that morning, what he couldn't possibly know sitting in his headquarters office in Berlin, was that the revolutionary technology systematically destroying his submarine force had first been successfully tested on a small Flower-class corvette designated HMS Orcis in the Firth of Clyde in Scotland on March 25, 1941, more than 2 full years before this moment of surrender and withdrawal. A prototype radar device officially designated Type 271 had successfully tracked a submerged submarine at 4,000 yards distance and detected its periscope at 900 yards. Detection ranges that seem like pure science fiction to experienced naval officers who had spent their entire careers relying exclusively on human eyesight, binoculars, and optical rangefinders. British radar engineers working at the secret telecommunications research establishment had achieved these seemingly impossible detection ranges by using a revolutionary cavity magnetron device operating at 10-centimeter wavelength, a frequency band that German radar warning receivers simply couldn't detect because German scientists and engineers had thoroughly convinced themselves through theoretical calculations that such high-frequency radars couldn't possibly exist or function effectively, thereby creating a catastrophic blind spot in Nazi Germany's defensive sensor systems that would prove absolutely fatal to the entire U-boat arm. The British radar operator sitting at his Type 271 console aboard HMS Orcis that cold March morning in 1941 had watched the glowing green trace on his circular oscilloscope display, carefully and methodically adjusting the sensitive gain control as the target submarine deliberately raised an attack periscope for a practice attack run during routine training exercises in the Firth of Clyde. And suddenly there was appearing on his radar screen almost like magic, like something from a science fiction novel. A sharp, distinctive spike at exactly 900 yards range, clear as daylight on his screen, perfectly visible and trackable, though the Scottish morning outside the ship was extremely thick with heavy mist and fog that reduced actual visual visibility to less than 50 yards to the lookouts on deck. The 10-centimeter wavelength radar waves were successfully penetrating through the sea clutter and confusing wave returns that would have completely swallowed and hidden the tiny periscope echo on older metric wavelength radars operating at much longer wavelengths, successfully pulling out and displaying the incredibly tiny radar signature of a thin periscope tube cutting through the ocean waves. And he had immediately called out the bearing information to the bridge officers, his voice remaining steady and professional despite the genuine excitement of watching genuine history being made before his eyes. Radar contact bearing 045 degrees, range 900 yards, target identified as probable submarine periscope. Not knowing, not possibly able to fully comprehend, that he was personally witnessing the very first successful operational demonstration of a technology that would directly sink 42 German U-boats in a single month just 2 years later, that would ultimately kill 30,000 German submariners over the course of the war, that would change and revolutionize naval warfare more completely and more rapidly than even the introduction of steam power or the revolutionary dreadnought. Battleship design had done. What made this particular moment in March 1941 truly revolutionary in the history of naval warfare? What absolutely separated it from every single previous radar development and advancement wasn't simply the successful detection itself of a submarine. Naval radar systems have been successfully tracking surface vessels since the late 1930s. British, German, American, and even Japanese ships all carried various types of radar systems by 1940. But the genuine breakthrough was the ability to successfully detect and track something as incredibly small as a submarine periscope cutting through ocean waves, a target less than 18 inches wide at its thickest point that earlier British radar systems operating at 1.5-meter wavelength simply couldn't distinguish at all from the sea surface itself, from wave tops and whitecaps and floating debris and seabirds. Yet this revolutionary new S-band radar system operating at exactly 2,950 megahertz frequency could resolve it clearly and distinctly, could successfully pick out that tiny metal periscope tube from all the confusing radar clutter of an angry, wave-tossed ocean. The remarkably narrow beam width of the distinctive cheese antenna, nicknamed for its characteristic truncated parabolic shape that genuinely looked like a wheel of cheese cut precisely in half, provided exceptional angular accuracy of just 2 degrees, precise enough to guide a corvette directly and accurately onto a submerged U-boat's exact position for a devastating depth charge attack with unprecedented accuracy. No more blind searching over wide ocean areas, no more educated guessing about submarine positions, no more relying entirely on the sonar operator's individual skill and pure luck. Just pure, reliable electronic precision pointing like an invisible finger directly at the enemy's submarine hiding beneath the protective waves. The revolutionary cavity magnetron device that made this seemingly impossible technological miracle actually possible had been invented by 2 brilliant British physicists named John Randall and Harry Boot, working at the University of Birmingham in February 1940, 2 dedicated scientists working in a laboratory that would have seemed remarkably primitive and underfunded by modern research standards. They created a device physically no bigger than a small electric motor, easily fitting in the palm of a grown man's hand, that could generate microwave radio frequency power levels that literally every previous physicist and electrical engineer had thought fundamentally impossible to achieve with existing vacuum tube technology and theoretical understanding. And within just weeks of its first successful laboratory demonstration, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, immediately recognizing genuine revolutionary genius when he personally saw it and instantly understanding exactly what this particular invention meant for Britain's survival in the war, had personally ordered it shared completely with the Americans in what would historically become known as the Tizard Mission, named after Sir Henry Tizard, who led the secret scientific delegation that carried the cavity magnetron to America. Churchill recognized with characteristic strategic insight that this single invention might very well determine the final outcome of the desperate Battle of the Atlantic, might literally be the difference between British national survival and complete starvation and defeat, between ultimate Allied victory and total Nazi conquest of Europe. Though neither Churchill nor any of the brilliant scientists working on the radar development project could have possibly predicted exactly how completely and how rapidly it would revolutionize anti-submarine warfare operations, turning the U-boat hunters into the hunted almost overnight. By September 1941, barely 6 months after that first successful test aboard HMS Orcis, 32 Royal Navy corvettes were equipped with operational Type 271 radar sets, each one featuring the distinctive lantern-shaped radome, mounted prominently on their bridge structures, looking to German U-boat commanders who observed them through periscopes like nothing more threatening than an odd navigation light housing, or perhaps some new communication equipment. Production orders from the Admiralty were climbing rapidly toward 350 complete radar units as British industry fully mobilized to manufacture these potentially war-winning devices as quickly as possible. Each individual radar set was being carefully assembled at the Allen West factory in London with the desperate wartime urgency of manufacturing a weapon that could literally and directly turn the entire tide of war, with factory workers voluntarily putting in exhausting 16-hour shifts with absolute priority allocation of scarce electronic components and critical raw materials. Though the Germans remained completely and tragically unaware of this massive radar development and deployment program, their intelligence services remained obsessively focused on breaking Allied convoy routing codes through cryptanalysis rather than investigating and analyzing the strange perspex dome structures that were increasingly appearing on British escort vessels, fundamentally missing the forest of the trees, desperately seeking intelligence coups when they should have been carefully analyzing new Allied technology. The German U-boat commanders actively operating in the North Atlantic during this critical period, from late 1941 through early 1943, still believed absolutely and without question that nighttime surface operations gave them complete invisibility from any form of detection made them the undisputed masters of the ocean. And why shouldn't they believe this with total confidence? Their tactical operational doctrine, carefully refined by Doenitz himself during his extensive time commanding U-boats in the First World War, stated categorically and without qualification that a surface submarine operating at night was virtually undetectable beyond 500 yards distance, even in the very best visibility conditions. This wasn't just abstract theory or hopeful thinking. It was solidly based on decades of practical submarine operational experience, on thousands upon thousands of hours of actual night operations, on the fundamental physical limitations of human eyesight operating in darkness. And their standard operational patterns clearly reflected this absolute confidence in their nighttime invisibility. Surface at dusk as natural light faded completely, run continuously on powerful diesel engines throughout the entire night, while simultaneously charging the massive battery banks that powered all underwater operations. Attack Allied convoys aggressively on the surface, where their 17-knot maximum speed gave them decisive mobility advantage over 10-knot merchant ships. Then dive well before dawn before Allied patrol aircraft could possibly spot them from above. This tactical pattern had worked brilliantly and devastatingly in 1940 and 1941, during what U-boat crews nostalgically called the happy time, when they were sinking Allied merchant ships significantly faster than the Allies could possibly build replacements. Captain Lieutenant Werner Heinke, commanding U-515 and keeping meticulous records, would later describe in his carefully maintained war diary the typical night surface routine that literally every U-boat commander followed like an inflexible religious ritual. Surface at exactly 2,100 hours. Sea state 3 with moderate waves running. Visibility approximately 2,000 meters in the complete darkness. Began standard battery charge cycle while proceeding on course 320 degrees at 12 knots, making excellent time toward the known convoy routes. Both diesel engines running smooth and reliable, producing familiar deep rumble that every experienced submariner found oddly comforting after many hours of near-silent electric motor operation underwater. The crew thoroughly enjoyed breathing fresh air after 14 consecutive hours submerged in the boat, with men smoking cigarettes on the conning tower, the acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixing pleasantly with clean salt spray. Absolutely no sign whatsoever of any enemy forces anywhere visible on the entire horizon. The ocean belonged completely to us in a protective darkness. Completely unaware, tragically and fatally unaware, that British escort vessels equipped with Type 271 radar could easily track his boat at 3 times his maximum visual range, continuously watching his every single move on their green, glowing radar displays, while his alert lookouts strained their eyes desperately and saw absolutely nothing except empty ocean stretching endlessly to the dark horizon. He was perfectly visible to British radar operators as clearly as if powerful searchlights were directly illuminating his entire boat, but had absolutely no idea, no clue whatsoever, no warning at all. The battery charging process itself created a severe tactical vulnerability that U-boat designers had never adequately addressed because they simply never imagined that technology would eventually make night surface operations genuinely dangerous. The massive lead-acid electrical storage systems required 6 to 8 full hours of continuous surface running to completely replenish the battery cells that powered absolutely all underwater operations, including propulsion, lighting, and life support. Each standard Type WWII U-boat, the reliable workhorse of the entire German submarine fleet comprising 70% of all boats, carried 2 complete independent sets of 62 individual cells each, weighing over 200 tons total when fully charged, representing a staggering amount of weight devoted exclusively to electrical energy storage. These massive battery banks demanded constant careful maintenance, needed regular topping up with distilled water, generated dangerously explosive hydrogen gas during the charging process that had to be continuously vented to prevent the boat from literally becoming a floating bomb. And most critically from a tactical operational perspective, the charging process absolutely forced the submarine to remain on the surface for extended periods whether tactical conditions were favorable or not, whether enemy forces were nearby or not. A severe weakness that radar technology would exploit with absolutely merciless efficiency, turning every single charging period into a potential death trap. During these tactically vulnerable charging periods, U-boats necessarily followed absolutely predictable patterns born entirely of engineering necessity, rather than any tactical choice or preference. Running at 8 to 12 knots to maximize diesel fuel efficiency and minimize precious fuel consumption during long extended patrols lasting weeks. Maintaining steady courses to avoid excessive battery power drain from constant maneuvering and frequent course changes. Posting extra lookouts, continuously scanning both sky and horizon, but relying primarily and almost completely on their METOX radar warning detectors to warn them of approaching enemy aircraft long before human eyes or ears could possibly detect the threat. The French-built METOX warning device swept radio frequencies from 79 to 300 MHz, effectively covering the 1.5-meter wavelength ASV Mark II radars that RAF Coastal Command aircraft had carried operationally since 1940. This reliable system gave U-boats typically 5 to 10 minutes advance warning before an aircraft could reach attack position, absolutely precious time to execute a crash dive and escape to the relative safety of protective depths. More than enough time in almost every case to get safely below periscope depth before the aircraft arrived directly overhead. The METOX receiver, manufactured by a small electronics company operating in occupied Paris using readily available French components, had absolutely transformed U-boat survivability when it was first introduced operationally in August 1942. Its distinctive Biscay cross antenna, looking remarkably like a large wooden crucifix, was erected prominently on the conning tower whenever the boat surfaced. The characteristic crackling and buzzing sounds in the operator's headphones whenever enemy radar pulses struck the receiving antenna, with the pitch and frequency increasing noticeably as the threatening aircraft drew closer, gave the commander precise advance warning of danger. And U-boat crews throughout the Atlantic had learned to trust this device completely with their lives, diving only when METOX actually warned them of genuine danger, thereby conserving precious battery power and maintaining valuable mobility on the surface as long as safely possible. This would have been absolutely impossible if they had to dive defensively for every distant aircraft engine sound, every passing bird flock, every false alarm. But METOX had given them tremendous confidence and operational freedom, except that METOX had one fatal technical limitation that German scientists and engineers hadn't anticipated, hadn't even considered remotely possible. It simply couldn't detect radar wavelengths below 50 centimeters, leaving U-boats completely and utterly blind to the 10-centimeter emissions of British Type 271 radar and the similar ASV Mark III radar that equipped Allied patrol aircraft. And even worse for German strategic prospects, Nazi scientists had thoroughly convinced themselves through elaborate theoretical calculations that centimetric radar was technically impossible to build with available technology, that atmospheric absorption effects would make such extremely high frequencies completely useless for practical detection beyond a few hundred meters maximum range. A catastrophic scientific miscalculation that would ultimately cost them the entire Battle of the Atlantic and 30,000 young German lives. If you're finding this investigation into the hidden technology that genuinely changed World War II absolutely fascinating, please hit that subscribe button right now and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today, and tell us which aspect of this incredible story surprises you most. Your engagement and interaction helps us continue producing this kind of detailed historical content. The Italian Navy's experience in the Mediterranean theater provided a clear preview, a stark warning of exactly what awaited the German U-boats, though neither the German Kriegsmarine nor the Italian Regia Marina learned anything from each other's catastrophic failures, because Axis military cooperation was virtually non-existent. The Regia Marina entered the war in June 1940 with absolutely no radar whatsoever, not a single working operational set in their entire Mediterranean fleet. Their admirals and senior commanders had completely dismissed electronic detection technology as entirely unnecessary in the relatively confined waters of the Mediterranean, where visual contact was supposedly always possible, where traditional naval warfare methods had worked successfully for centuries. An absolutely fatal assumption that British radar-equipped vessels would shatter repeatedly in devastating night engagements, most catastrophically at the Battle of Cape Matapan in March 1941, where 3 Italian heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers were utterly annihilated in a one-sided night action they literally never saw coming, never knew was happening until heavy shells were already landing directly on their unprotected decks. Admiral Angelo Iacchino, commanding the Italian fleet at Matapan, would later write with painful honesty in his memoirs, "We were fighting completely blind against an enemy who could see perfectly in total darkness." His ships were completely unable to detect the approach of British battleships whose Type 279 air search radar tracked them continuously at 24,000 yards, nearly 14 miles distance, while Italian optical rangefinders and carefully trained lookouts with excellent night vision saw absolutely nothing except endless darkness. The British heavy guns opened devastating fire at point-blank range, achieving complete tactical surprise. And even after this absolute disaster, this utterly crushing defeat, the Italian Navy still wouldn't receive its first operational radar sets until spring 1943, far too late to affect the naval balance that had already shifted decisively toward the Allies. The Imperial Japanese Navy, despite beginning serious radar development work as early as 1936 under Professor Yagi Hidetsugu, the brilliant physicist whose revolutionary Yagi antenna design would ironically become standard equipment on Allied radar systems worldwide, suffered from even worse organizational dysfunction than the Italians when it came to actual radar deployment. The Imperial Japanese Navy and the Imperial Japanese Army developed completely separate and totally incompatible radar systems that couldn't communicate with each other at all, couldn't share technology or research findings, couldn't coordinate production, because the bitter rivalry between the two services was so intense and deep that they literally preferred to lose the war rather than cooperate effectively with each other. And by 1943, when most Allied ships carried multiple sophisticated radar sets for different tactical purposes, Japanese vessels were still relying primarily on optical rangefinders, mechanical fire control computers, and supposedly superior natural night vision of their carefully selected and trained lookouts. A severe tactical handicap that American radar-directed naval gunfire would exploit absolutely ruthlessly in the brutal night surface battles around Guadalcanal. Commander Tamichi Hara of the Japanese destroyer Shiger described with shocking honesty the terror of facing American radar at Tassafaronga. American torpedoes came from nowhere. No gun flashes, no searchlights, just sudden explosions. The Americans were firing from positions we couldn't see, guided by equipment we didn't understand. Though even this devastating demonstration didn't convince Japanese leadership to prioritize radar development. Back in the North Atlantic, which remained the decisive theater of the entire naval war, the first subtle signs that something fundamental had changed in submarine warfare came gradually through the dark winter months of 1942 into early 1943. U-boat commanders began reporting increasingly accurate night attacks by Allied escort vessels, with depth charges falling much closer than luck could explain. But German naval intelligence attributed this to improved tactics rather than revolutionary technology, a fatal misunderstanding that prevented effective countermeasures during the crucial period when they might have made a difference. The British, meanwhile, were systematically upgrading their radar capabilities. The Type 271Q introduced in early 1943 featured a 70-kilowatt magnetron, providing greater range and resolution, combined with planned position indicator displays, showing a god's-eye view of the surrounding ocean. Lieutenant Commander Donald McIntyre, commanding Escort Group B2, described the transformation. With Type 271Q operational, night surface attacks by U-boats have become suicidal. We detect them seconds after surfacing, track them continuously, attack before they know we're present. The radar operator calls out ranges while we close for the kill. Hedgehog projectiles fired on radar bearing alone. No visual contact needed. The Hedgehog weapon represented another technological leap that radar made devastating. 24 spigot mortars firing contact fused projectiles ahead of the attacking vessel, allowing continuous sonar contact throughout the attack instead of losing the target in the ship's wake. Combined with radar detection, kill probability increased from less than 5% to over 30%. But the real transformation came with airborne centimetric radar. The ASV Mark III entered service in early 1943, using 10-centimeter technology in patrol aircraft, particularly B-24 Liberators that could patrol the mid-Atlantic air gap. These radars could detect surface U-boats at 20 miles, periscopes at 5 miles, without triggering METOX receivers. Squadron leader Terrence Bullock described his first attack. Radar operator called contact at 18 miles. We approached from down moon, maintaining altitude. The U-boat was charging batteries. No indication they knew we were coming. We switched on the lee light at 1 mile, catching them completely exposed. Our depth charges straddled perfectly. Oil and debris surfaced. One of 6 U-boats, his squadron, destroyed in March 1943 alone. The lee light, a 22 million candle power searchlight, turned final approaches into death traps. The brilliant beam illuminating submarines like daylight, giving gunners perfect visibility while depth charges fell. U-boat survivors described the psychological terror. Oberleutnant Zur C. Herbert Werner recorded in iron coffins. The night exploded into light without warning. No METOX alert, no engine sound, just blinding illumination from overhead. Men screaming as we tumbled through the hatch. Depth charges, so close cork insulation rained from overhead. We knew then the night no longer belonged to us. By March 1943, shipborne and airborne radar created an integrated network, leaving no safe space for U-boats. Every convoy surrounded by escorts seeing through darkness. Aircraft patrolled with undetectable sensors. The mathematics were relentless. Type WWII boats needed 6 to 8 hours surface time daily to charge batteries. Submerged speed insufficient for attack positioning meant surface running. But every hour exposed them to detection beyond visual range. Once detected, coordinated attacks from multiple escorts and aircraft struck before commanders knew danger existed. The German response proved inadequate. Naxos detector introduced September 1943 could detect 10-centimeter emissions, but suffered excessive sensitivity, triggering false alarms, causing crews to ignore warnings. And allies were already developing 3-centimeter radar Naxos couldn't detect, maintaining technological advantage. Germans always 2 years behind. Doenitz desperately interrogated survivors, analyzed patrol reports, consulted experts. He concluded Allies detected METOX emissions itself, ordered all detectors shut down August 1943. A decision leaving boats more vulnerable while the real problem, centimetric radar, remained unrecognized until captured equipment revealed truth late in 1943. The psychological impact devastated crews. Young men who volunteered believing in superiority now found themselves helpless. Morale collapsed as boats failed to return. Drumbeat heroes who ravaged American shipping now died in Bay of Biscay before reaching operational areas. Funkmat Heinz Schaefer described the atmosphere. We felt like rabbits, not hunters. Every surface moment filled with dread. Everyone watching sky, listening for engines, knowing death could come without warning. Old hands told happy time stories, but those days were gone, replaced by fear growing with every patrol. Japanese submarines observed German failures. Admiral Miwa requesting technical information, but Germans, humiliated, provided limited details. Japanese submarines continued with inferior equipment. Losses mounted as American radar made their large boats easy targets. Lieutenant Commander Zengio Rita wrote, "We heard rumors about German boats destroyed by mysterious detection. We experienced the same terror. American aircraft appeared from nowhere. We learned too late our technology was generations behind." Italian submarines found salvation in September 1943 armistice, switching sides as Germans were slaughtered, though several continued fighting alongside Japanese, experiencing the same destruction. Tenente di Vascello Enzo Grossi described operations without radar. We sailed blind while enemies had perfect vision. Aircraft found us in weather that should hide us. Every surface was gambling with death. Radar integrated with other technologies multiplied lethality, high-frequency direction finding triangulated radio transmissions. Ultra-intelligence from broken Enigma codes revealed patrol routes, while radar provided tactical detection to exploit intelligence. Commander Peter Gretton explained, "Ultra told us what look, Huff Duff told us when they transmitted, but radar let us see them, turning intelligence into kills." A U-boat might evade one system, but not all three working together. The convoy battle around ONS, 5 in late April and early May 1943, demonstrated radar's decisive impact. 40 U-boats concentrated against this slow convoy. Weather favored attackers with rain squalls and rough seas. perfect conditions for surface night attacks. But Type 271 radars tracked every approach, vector reinforcements, coordinated counterattacks, sinking 6 U-boats while losing only 13 merchants. An exchange ratio making continued operations impossible. HMS Duncan detected boat after boat attempting penetration. Her operator called contacts repeatedly. Radar contact bearing 270, range 3,500 yards, target speed 12 knots, probable U-boat charging batteries. The destroyer raced intercept while the submarine remained unaware until star shells burst overhead and depth charges bracketed position, forcing emergency dive that eliminated attack chance. This repeated dozens of times, radar turning Turkey shoot into defensive victory, shaking German confidence. Monthly losses mounted in terrifying progression. 10 boats February, 15 March, 20 April, then 42 in May. Nearly 3 times previous worst month. Experienced commanders dying faster than replacement. Training pipeline unable to keep pace. Quality declining as inexperienced crews rushed into service. Corvette Captain Victor Schutze, highly successful commander, withdrew after barely surviving radar attack, telling fellow officers, "The game changed completely. We're fighting an enemy seeing in darkness while we're blind. Sending more boats is murder. We need new technology or tactics, but current operations are suicide." The Type XXI Electabut designed for sustained underwater operations should have restored effectiveness, but production delays meant only one completed combat patrol before war's end. Retrofitting snorkels to existing boats created different vulnerability. Boats could run diesel submerged at periscope depth, but speed reduced to 5 knots, impossible for attack positioning. And snorkel heads created radar signatures skilled operators could detect. Oberleutnant zur See Albert Schnee described snorkel torture. Running submerged was physical torture. Exhaust gases leaked poisoning air. Pressure changes burst eardrums. Speed so slow we couldn't chase convoys. And always fear radar could see snorkels as easily as conning towers. Bay of Biscay became killing ground where radar-equipped aircraft maintained constant patrol. Bay Offensive demonstrated fatal combination of ASV Mark III and Lee lights. Aircraft flew parallel patterns covering every square mile. U-boats forced to run submerged even at night, drastically increasing transit times. Flight Lieutenant Kenneth Moore described typical patrol. "We flew at 2,000 feet, radar scanning continuously. Bay divided into overlapping sectors. Nearly every patrol, we found them trying to slip through at night. But radar saw everything. Once we had them to lee light, and depth charges finished it. Technological surprise was complete because German scientists dismissed centimetric radar as impossible. Their magnetrons failed achieving useful power, generating only watts where military applications required kilowatts. Not realizing British researchers solved the problem with different cavity, design generating 50 kilowatts, where German equivalents produced nothing. This failure cost thousands of lives. Professor Leo Brand admitted during interrogation, "We convinced ourselves centimetric radar would be useless. Our calculations showed atmospheric absorption would attenuate signals beyond a few hundred meters. We never considered raw power could overcome absorption. British were generating levels we thought impossible. Japanese suffered similar blindness, their development hampered by inter-service rivalry, preventing research sharing. Both services dismissed American capabilities until devastating combat taught painful lessons. Captain Toshikazu Ami described realization. We believe superior night fighting skills gave us advantage, but Americans could see beyond visual range. Their radar-directed guns fired with accuracy we couldn't match. Our tactical superiority, meaningless against technology we didn't possess. Italian Navy's experience proved equally tragic. Their few GU-4 radars arriving spring 1943, just months before our armistice. Admiral Raphael de Courten lamented, "We entered technological war with 19th century methods believing Mediterranean conditions made radar unnecessary. But Cape Matapan proved we fought blind. Only 12 warships received radar before surrender. The human cost was staggering. 1,832 submariners died, May 1943 alone. entire crews vanishing as depth charges split hulls. Matro Sennfreiter Hans Gerbila, one of 3 survivors from U-556, described final moments. Depth charges came from nowhere, just sudden explosions throwing men against bulkheads. Lights failing, water rushing through torn hull, the boat rolling past 90 degrees. Damage too severe. Abandoned ship order came too late. 45 comrades trapped inside as she went down. Their screams haunt me still. Strategic impact extended beyond numbers. The U-boat threat that nearly starved Britain was neutralized so thoroughly convoys crossed virtually unmolested after June 1943. Liberty ships delivered supplies faster than U-boats could sink them. The battle won not by courage or seamanship, but by technology Germans never anticipated. Churchill wrote, "The cavity magnetron, no larger than small electric motor, proved more valuable than divisions of troops, giving our forces ability to see in darkness what submarines thought hidden. A single breakthrough worth more than all gold in Bank of England." American contribution, initially limited to adapting British technology, soon exceeded original. American engineers developed improved magnetrons generating higher power. Their 3-centimeter H2X radar achieved resolution detecting periscopes in sea states that swamped 10-centimeter returns. Admiral Ernest King, initially skeptical, became enthusiastic convert. The ability to detect periscopes at night seemed like magic, but Type 271 proved it repeatedly. Once we understood implications, we pushed production to maximum, equipping every vessel, deliberately turning Atlantic into U-boat graveyard. Soviet Navy receiving Type 271 through Lend-Lease achieved similar results in Baltic and Arctic. Captain Alexei Lavrov reported, "British radar gave us eyes in polar night, detecting German boats." Fascist submarines learned Arctic darkness no longer protected them. Swedish naval attaché Commander Eric Alland observed, "Battle turned on single technology Germany failed to anticipate. Their boats designed for war where darkness meant invisibility." But British radar eliminated that assumption. Technology defeats tactics, absolutely. Psychological warfare proved equally devastating. U-boat crews developed radar neurosis from constant fear of invisible detection, creating stress casualties even among boats never encountering attacks. Men suffered breakdowns from unbearable strain. Corvette and Captain Reinhard Lehmann-Willenbrock observed psychological deterioration. Crews previously eager for combat now dreaded leaving port. New men heard terrifying survivor stories. Tales of boats caught with no warning, entire crews lost in minutes. You could see fear in their eyes during charging. Everyone listening for engines, watching for searchlights, knowing radar made us visible when we couldn't see anything approaching. The hunters had become hunted. The technological race continued even after radar's impact became clear. German engineers developed Hohentuil surface search radar capable of detecting aircraft at 10 to 20 kilometers and surface vessels at 7 kilometers. But operated at wavelengths Allied detectors easily identified, creating an impossible dilemma where using radar to detect enemies simultaneously revealed the U-boat's position, completely negating any advantage. Fregaten Captain Gunnar Hessler, Doenitz's son-in-law and chief of staff at U-boat command, analyzed this trap with brutal honesty. Every countermeasure we developed arrived too late and created new vulnerabilities. Naxos detected 10 centimeter, but not 3 centimeter. Our Hohentuil revealed our positions to enemy direction finders. Snorkels reduced speed below tactical usefulness. The Electroboot might have restored advantage, but production came years too late. We were always minimum one step behind in technological race, where second place meant death for our crews. His assessment reflected High Command's recognition of complete and irreversible defeat. The training infrastructure adapted to radar's demands. Schools established to teach operators the art of distinguishing submarine returns from wave clutter, recognizing the characteristic spike of periscope versus floating debris, understanding atmospheric conditions affecting propagation, skills that meant difference between successful detection and U-boat escaping to attack convoys. Leading seaman Ronald Mason, Type 271 operator on HMS Vedette, described the training. "We spent weeks learning to read the scope, understanding that sea state affected returns, that temperature inversions could create false contacts, that periscope made distinctive sharp spike, while debris gave fuzzy returns. The difference between life and death for merchant sailors depended on our ability to distinguish real targets from ghost returns. His expertise typical of thousands of operators who became the eyes of the fleet. Maintenance challenges of operating complex electronics in marine environments pushed technological development. Moisture-proof housings, shock-mounted components, stabilized platforms to maintain antenna orientation in rough seas. Each problem solved advancing the art of military electronics, creating capabilities that would define post-war naval development. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Clark, radar technician aboard HMS Sheffield, explained the challenges. Salt spray corroded connections. Vibration loosened components. Temperature changes cause condensation inside units. Keeping these sets operational required constant attention. But we knew lives depended on that radar working when needed. So we improvised solutions, created maintenance procedures, developed expertise that didn't exist before the war. His experience replicated across every radar-equipped vessel. German reaction to radar defeat influenced post-war naval development. There are few surviving U-boat commanders advocating for submarines that could operate entirely submerged, never needing to surface where radar could detect them, leading directly to nuclear submarine development where underwater endurance became unlimited. Though the solution came decades too late to affect World War II's outcome. Counter-Admiral Eberhard Gott, chief of U-boat operations, testified at Nuremberg. Radar defeated us completely. Our entire tactical doctrine assumed darkness provided concealment, that surface mobility gave us advantage. But British radar eliminated both assumptions, forcing us to continue operations we knew were suicidal, because admitting defeat meant accepting that technology had made our submarine force obsolete. His testimony confirmed that German leadership understood their technological disadvantage but couldn't counter it. The Pacific submarine campaign demonstrated different dynamics. American boats equipped with superior radar-hunting Japanese vessels that lacked both radar and radar detectors. USS Wahoo under Commander Dudley Morton using radar to track targets beyond visual range, surfacing to attack positions Japanese escorts couldn't detect, achieving kill ratios that dwarfed German U-boat successes even during their happy time. Commander Richard O'Kane, commanding USS Tang, described the advantage. Our SJ radar could track Japanese convoys at 25,000 yards. We'd plot their course and speed, move ahead on surface using radar to avoid escorts, attack from ahead where they didn't expect submarines, then escape on surface guided by radar, while they searched blindly. Technology gave us near impunity against enemy operating with World War I methods. His boat sank 33 ships before being lost to own torpedo. The Mediterranean submarine campaign saw similar disparities. British T-class boats equipped with Type 291 radar-hunting Italian submarines operating blind. HMS Upholder under Lieutenant Commander Malcolm Wanklyn, using radar to track Italian supply convoys to North Africa, sinking over 100,000 tons of shipping, while Italian submarines achieved minimal results despite superior numbers. Capitano de Corvetta Gianfranco, Gazzana Prairaggia, commanding submarine Bagnolini, admitted, "We operated like blind men, while British submarines had perfect vision. Our boats were detected and destroyed before we knew enemies were present. The few radar sets we received in 1943 coming too late to matter. Naval balance already decisively shifted by British technological superiority we couldn't match." His elite submarine unit disbanded after catastrophic losses. The economic impact of radar victory rippled through entire nations. Britain's survival depended on Atlantic convoys that U-boats nearly severed in 1942. But radar's defeat of submarine threat allowed massive buildup of supplies for D-Day. 2 million Americans transported across Atlantic without significant loss after mid-1943. The arsenal of democracy delivering victory through sea lanes that radar kept open. The U-boat building program, consuming enormous German resources, produced 73 Type 7 submarines monthly, each requiring specialized steel batteries, diesels, torpedoes, and trained crews. Yet radar rendered this massive investment worthless. Boats destroyed faster than they could be built. Experienced crews lost faster than replacements could be trained. The entire submarine force reduced to impotence by technology costing fraction of submarine construction. Reich Minister Albert Speer, head of German war production, calculated the waste. We invested billions of Reichsmarks in U-boats that radar made obsolete, resources that could build thousands of tanks or aircraft. But we continued building submarines even after their futility became obvious, trapped by institutional momentum and Hitler's insistence that wonder weapons would reverse defeat, throwing good money after bad, while Allied radar ensured those boats would die on their first patrols. His post-war memoirs reveal economic catastrophe of fighting technology with numbers. The scientific legacy extended beyond military applications. Cavity magnetron technology enabling microwave communications, radar astronomy, medical imaging, countless civilian applications stemming from device that first allowed HMS Orcis to detect periscope at 900 yards. The butterfly effect of scientific breakthrough transforming entire civilization. Sir Robert Watson Watt, often credited as radar's inventor though technology had multiple fathers, reflected, "We gave sight to the blind, allowing ships to see through darkness and weather, aircraft to detect what human eyes could never perceive." But real victory was proving that scientific superiority could determine military outcomes, that small device generating electromagnetic waves could defeat largest submarine fleet ever assembled. His contribution to victory measured not in battles, but in technologies that rendered entire enemy strategies obsolete. The intelligence failure that allowed radar surprise reflected deeper German institutional problems. Their scientific community isolated from international developments, dismissing Allied capabilities based on their own limitations. Unable to imagine that British scientists had solved problems German researchers considered impossible. Arrogance becoming blindness that cost thousands of lives. Dr. Hans Ferdinand Mayer, German radar researcher, admitted after interrogation, "We knew the British had radar. Everyone did, but we assumed their technology was similar to ours, operating at frequencies we could detect and counter, never imagining they had achieved power levels at wavelengths we thought impossible. Our insularity prevented us from recognizing threats that should have been obvious." His confession revealed how scientific hubris contributed to military defeat. British success stemmed partly from international cooperation. Polish scientists providing crucial intelligence about German radar development. French researchers contributing magnetron improvements. American industrial capacity mass-producing British designs. Canadian scientists refining detection algorithms. The Allied scientific community shared knowledge while Axis powers worked in isolation. Professor Mark Oliphant, part of British radar development team, explained the advantage. "We had the world's best minds working together, sharing discoveries, building on each other's work, while German scientists operated in secrecy even from each other. Japanese researchers forbidden to communicate with Germans. Italians excluded entirely. Their isolation prevented the cross-pollination that drives scientific breakthroughs." His assessment, confirmed by comparative analysis of Axis versus Allied technological development, operational security protecting radar secrets, proved remarkably effective. Thousands of sailors and airmen knew about centimetric radar, yet the secret remained hidden from German intelligence for crucial years. Crews disciplined about not discussing capabilities in letters home. The press voluntarily censoring stories that might reveal technological advantages. Democracy proved capable of keeping secrets when survival depended on it. Vice Admiral Sir Peter Gretton wrote post-war, "Every escort sailor knew that radar was winning the battle, that U-boats couldn't detect our sensors, but this knowledge never reached German intelligence in actionable form. Our security measures worked perfectly when they mattered most, protecting the technological advantage that saved countless lives and determined war's outcome." His testimony to effectiveness of Allied counterintelligence. The radar development pipeline continued producing improvements throughout the war. Type 277 replaced 271 with even greater range and resolution. 3-centimeter sets replacing 10-centimeter. Each generation maintaining technological superiority over German countermeasures. The scientific war won by maintaining momentum rather than resting on initial advantages. Air Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, commander of RAF Bomber Command, observed, "We learned that technological superiority was temporary, that enemies would eventually develop countermeasures. so we kept advancing, newer radars replacing older ones before Germans could counter them, maintaining advantage through continuous development rather than believing any single technology would remain decisive forever. His philosophy drove Allied research throughout the war. Post-war analysis revealed how completely radar had transformed naval warfare. Traditional tactics obsolete. Visual range engagement replaced by beyond-horizon combat. Surface vessels no longer able to hide in darkness or weather. Submarines forced to evolve toward true underwater operation rather than submersible surface vessels. Every assumption about naval combat overturned by electromagnetic detection. Admiral of the Fleet Sir Dudley Pound concluded, Nelson's tactics at Trafalgar remained relevant for over a century, but radar changed naval warfare more in 5 years than previous centuries combined, making traditional battle lines obsolete, enabling coordinated operations across oceanic distances, transforming submarines from invisible predators to vulnerable targets. The age of electromagnetic warfare, replacing the age of sail and steam. His assessment defined naval doctrine for the nuclear age. The U-boat memorial at Moltenort lists 27,491 names of submariners lost at sea, most dying after May 1943, when radar made their operations suicidal. Young men who volunteered believing in technological superiority, die in technology they never understood. Their sacrifice ultimately meaningless against electromagnetic waves that revealed them in darkness they thought provided protection. The final irony came from Doenitz himself, promoted to command entire Kriegsmarine after radar defeated his submarines, then briefly serving as Germany's head of state after Hitler's suicide. The admiral who lost the Battle of the Atlantic to British radar, presiding over Third Reich's final collapse. His career bookended by technological defeat, he never fully comprehended until too late to matter. On that morning of May 24, 1943, as Doenitz transmitted the withdrawal order, he couldn't have known the war was effectively over. That radar had eliminated Germany's only remaining strategic weapon capable of affecting the outcome. That the technology first tested on HMS Orcis 2 years earlier had grown into an electromagnetic network, making Allied victory inevitable. The cavity magnetron proved mightier than all the U-boats ever built. The last entry in U-Boat Command War Diary for May 1943 read simply, "The enemy's superiority in location devices has made continuation of the battle impossible. Withdrawal from the Atlantic is necessary to prevent further catastrophic losses." 15 words admitting total defeat by technology German science had declared impossible, British engineering had made reality, and 42 U-boats had died, proving decisive in the Battle of Atlantic. The waves of the North Atlantic continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to the technological revolution that had played out across their surface. But beneath those waves lay graves of thousands of submariners who had believed darkness was their ally, never knowing that invisible electromagnetic waves had betrayed them to enemies they never saw. The Battle of the Atlantic won not by bravest sailors or largest fleets, but by scientists in British laboratories who had given their nation the power to see in darkness, a power that changed not just one battle, but the entire nature of war itself. Thank you for watching this investigation into the secret technology that changed World War II. If you enjoyed this detailed historical analysis, please subscribe to the channel and check out the other videos on your screen now for more fascinating untold stories from history.